following this for 15 years. I've been following it for 40. I sent, forget my slides. I sent some slides taken in 1967 of Gelman spraying materials.
That's exactly the kind of thing we need to know.
In the backyard, I sent it to you and you responded, so I sent it to you.
Must be there someplace.
I'll send it again.
I'm Roger Rail. I'm co-chair of SI Residence for Safe Water, and SI Residence is a member of CARD.
And I'm Sybil Colin, the project manager on the Gelman site for the remediation and redevelopment.
On that note, I will fess up too. I live right on top of the flume by First Sister Lake in Dalton Park. So I'm an affected party also.
In here someplace.
Yeah, right down just by the Union Park Lake Lane. A little road no one can find. Roger, you want to start out with talking a little bit about the IPC and CARD?
Yeah, well, since most of you, a good number of you are members of CARD, I don't need to review this for you, but CARD got formed. CARD stands for Coalition for Action and Remediation of Dioxane. Is that right?
Yeah.
The creator of the acronym. And it came out of an effort to make permanent the efforts of the IPC, Intergovernmental Partnership Committee. Back in 1997, when Gelman wanted to, well, it was actually called by that point, Gelman wanted to put the pipelines in at Everton. There was they were kind of doing it on the sly and without regards for the community and the local government concerns. So we formed an Intergovernmental Partnership Committee to respond to that, and we were somewhat effective. And the Intergovernmental Partnership stayed on, and kind of the background, when things were normal, would rise again when there was some controversy, but it was always kind of reacting to what was going on rather than getting ahead of it and being proactive. So a year and a half or 2 years ago, we started talking about forming a permanent intergovernmental partnership, and that's when this CARD coalition came about, and all the local governments that are part of the past resolutions to morph the IPC into CARD and make it a permanent organization with some staff support, something we never had before. And that's really proved effective. The CARD meetings, which DQ attends, we talk about policy issues, but then we also have a technical meeting with people that are interested in the technical aspects of it, with local government representatives and citizen representatives. For instance, Larry back there is one of the key technical representatives on the CARD technical committee. And we actually we review the proposals that the company has set forth and present pretty much a consensus view for the DEQ to respond to. We actually give advice to the DEQ on what we think should happen. And there's DEQ technical people at these meetings too. So it's really made a difference having this unified group go forward and take care of things. And maybe that's part of the reason that we don't have a lot of lay people here, is because they now know that somebody's actually doing something from the local government standpoint to take care of this. I don't think it's just apathy. I think it's they're trusting that the local governments are and the citizens are getting their arms around this problem and help point in the right direction. So, as a part of the CARD function, we decided that we should have an annual update. So this is the first annual update. In spite of the low turnout of lay people, I think it's still worthwhile to get this out there and at least get questions from people that are here and have some kind of feedback to the public about this, which we will do through our various websites. Doing a videotape of this, so if it turns out all right, we'll put this up on CTN and people will at least know about it. Any questions on what CARD is? Put that next down here with the history.
Well, remind people when we move there.
Oh, when the card meetings are?
It's every month.
Yeah, there's some different changes around depending on holidays and things like that. But the website that's out there, it's available through any number of the other websites it's like linked to. But, if you look at the county website, it looks for the card website. That's one way to get to it. I always tell people, because I'm a member of SRSW, that's the easiest one to remember, srsw.org. Yeah, and there's links to all these things for that. It's like 2 clicks to get to it. Some of the other websites you have to do some searching for.
I think we're on this off the city page.
Yeah, the city page has links.
SRSW and,
I was a little chagrined to find just this weekend that some of my links to the city site were obsolete. I had to update those.
the city's gone to
There's the
a
ASP
new,
extension.
Microsoft product. And, it has been, to say the least, problematic. But I don't get to make those choices. I just have to convert 100 pages of our state environment for into that.
So if you happen to click on one of these links for the city and it says error 404, let us try another one. Yeah, let us know if you try to catch some of the ones that I was. So we wanted to do a brief update of the site. I think everybody knows about this, but I'll go over it all anyway. And I'm using Google Earth to do this. I have to be offline right now, but that's one of the nice things about Google Earth is you can still do your presentation even though you don't have a network connection. And this original site, Gelman moved to Ann Arbor from Chelsea in 1963. And used a pond one here for their waste disposal because they didn't have a sewer system at that time. And it was an online treatment pond. If you're using this presentation of Google Earth, you can actually see some text when you click on one of these things, one of the icons. And some of this in here actually came from one of the Paul Gelman's reports. And then if we draw a little bit further forward in 1964, I think it was, they started, they had to build a second pond. They started using dioxane in 1966. By the way, if you're wondering why this is cut off, it's because this projector is low resolution. Can't make these things shift. So they output this dioxane along with their waste stream with other things that were supposed to be put into the ground. Out in Pond 1 and Pond 2, which is right next door here. And both of those eventually filled up and they finally built Pond 3, which is like a 3 million gallon pond. And at that point they started using spray irrigation to try to biodegrade the dioxane and other things that were in their outputs. They weren't, of course, telling anybody they were putting dioxane out into the they were calling it things like ethylene glycol ethers and things like that they were reporting to the state. There were some whistleblowers that a little bit later that started to, from the inside the company, that started to alert the state of things going on. But it wasn't until well, of course, while the spray irrigation was going on, there was a lot of this spray wafting across the road into people's homes who live across the street. Just like
Roger,
the-
when I first heard the description spray irrigation, and for years, I had this notion of just sort of a low-level spray. But
Yeah,
that-
it's like
That wasn't what it
sprinklers.
was it?
Well, they had some pretty big sprinklers because they had big
Yeah.
lawns here. This is quite a few acres.
But how high up was it? I was told it was shot up pretty high.
You have some pictures of that? I think it shot up pretty high because they didn't have a lot of little lawn sprinklers. They had some big
Right.
heavy-duty sprinklers that covered
That's right.
maybe a quarter of an acre or something like that. And it doesn't take much wind to start moving that stuff around. I know that when it was at the peak, they were like mowing their lawn every 3 days.
They were.
They were mowing, had to mow their lawns here every 3 days because there were so many nutrients going in there. And of course, all the water that the lawn was drying like crazy. Of course, there probably was some biodegradation going on, but they probably lost some of the groundwater here, just like they did in the online treatment ponds here. Then they started in 1986, the U of M Public Health Student discovered dioxane in the third sister lake. Well, actually, it's in 1984, but 1986, before the company owned up to the fact that it's theirs. It's quite using dioxane at that point. And then they started pumping from a red-skin industry, what used to be their supply well, and putting it down into the deep, 6,000 feet deep well here on the property. And that continued on until 1994 when they quit using the deep well. So that's basically how the contamination got into the ground, is through those water treatment ponds, through the lift station, through the bird pit, through spray irrigation, a number of other things, little accidents that happened. So 1993, they started their first actual treatment system at Evergreen. And they would pump from a perch well, treat it to non-detect, and re-inject it into the E unit, this injection well right at the moment. And that continued on until 1997. At which time they were having trouble with their injection of the deep well, so they wanted, not deep well, but their first injection well. So they built another injection well, upgrading it, and needed a pipeline to go to that. So this is called Evergreen Phase 1, where they now had 2 purge wells, and they were pumping it all the way over to IW2, and again re-injecting it into an uncontaminated aquifer and treating the non-contaminated. And then the original core treatment started in 1997, and they were pumping basically from 4 wells, or skin, PW1 and PW1, and treating it to less than 10 parts per billion. Is that what the original was? Yeah. They had a number of cases where they couldn't even meet that. They had some really high mess ups. And their average was fluctuating even with that for a number of years. And then they gradually expanded that, so the current water treatment now includes the Evergreen system, because they had to shut down the Evergreen system because they weren't able to treat their undersized treatment system at Evergreen. They instead chose to build a $2 million pipeline back to the core and send the Evergreen water back to the core, where they didn't have to treat it to non-detect. Move the treatment system from Evergreen back to the core to augment the treatment system that's already there. And gradually added a whole bunch of wells over the years. So now we've got a whole number of wells being fed into the treatment system at the core. That goes into, ends up in the tributary of Honey Creek here, which runs out Honey Creek and Honey Creek and into the Huron River, where just upstream from where Ann Arbor gets 80% water. So the discharge point is right about here, and here's where it's at. So there's already dioxane going into the water supply. It's just that it's too low to be detected, so it's not really there. A few years ago, they decided that their core treatment system, which was able to go to non-detect a number of times whenever they wanted to, apparently, it was too expensive to operate. They were using UV oxidation, which is ultraviolet light with hydrogen peroxide to help provide oxygen to the process and break down the dioxide. They were able to go to non-detect, sometimes for weeks at a time, but it got too expensive to operate, so they asked the state if they could switch to this ozone oxidation, which was less expensive, but it's only been able to treat pretty much the 5 or 6 parts per billion, which is under the 10 parts per billion that they can discharge. And I gotta admit that it is more reliable. It is a very stable system. One of the problems with it is that because there's bromide in the water, it creates bromine, which is another carcinogen, which wasn't there. So they're actually creating a carcinogen. When they're getting rid of part of the dioxane carcinogen, they're creating another carcinogen. And that's going into the outlet, and that's also in the discharge in the water supply. But again, it's at low enough levels that it's not detected, so you can all pretend that it isn't there. So this is the core treatment, pretty extensive. They had a little trouble with their pipeline back to the core here. The north part of it failed, and instead of what they had to do, they used the north perch well, which is a horizontal perch well here. They used that for a transmission pipe, converted that to a transmission pipe. And I guess that's been working, even though it was designed as a perch well. And the last part of the cleanup just happened, started just recently, and that's at Maple Road, where they're purging and re-injecting back into the aquifer. This time they're not under 10 parts per billion, they're a little over there right now, right? So
We have to be 85 parts per billion because they are re-injecting into the already contaminated aquifer.
great. So that's there's been some problems with that.
Could you show where the re-injection well
I'm sorry?
is? Where the re-injection well is?
Well, this is one of them, and I don't know, what we can go over this one. So they're re-injecting here and here. Anyway, that's a little brief history. With this resolution, it was kind of hard to see some of the year changes, but this is all part of this Google Earth mashup that's available on our website for downloading. Anybody wants to download it, play with it on their own home computer. So if you go to srsw.org and choose the right column, it says download. This is a big 8 megabyte Google Earth file, KMZ file.
Roger,
Yeah.
while you have the map up, what's the significance of Maple Road and the flows under Maple Road?
Oh, yeah, I think Sybil's probably you're gonna cover that a little bit. Yeah, there's different standards for cleanup in different parts of the site. And I think Sybil will go into that in some detail. Or if not, we'll cover it. Yeah. Any other questions on the history? I mean, there's a lot of history I left off because I just wanted to do a brief overview. There's a lot of political history and shenanigan history that people can talk about. This is more talking about the technical part of things. And as the years go on, we may want to go back and fill in some of that other stuff too. Yeah.
Did we do any remediation that's non-detect at this point? On any part of the site?
The two non-detect? Well, there's some wells that used to have dioxane that now are non-detect. But some of those are in places they didn't purge, so just the water moved. Clean water came in where dirty water used to be.
So not using that old treatment system anywhere on site?
They're using the evergreen one, as part of it before, right?
I don't believe so.
Oh, that's right,
That was
that's
UV
right.
anyway. so-
That was UV. Do they still have the UV as a backup?
I'm not sure. I mean, I know that they were supposed to keep it on hand for at least a year, I believe, to ensure that the new system was going to be adequate. And they have met their limits, so I'm not certain if they still have that available or not.
So,
Sybil, when you're giving your part, are you going to talk about the efficacy of the rejection of Maple Road?
I'm going to talk about the current status of it. I mean, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'm going to mostly focus on what's happened in the past year. But I think once we get through that, we can go back and explore things in more detail, depending on people's interests.
Maybe Mitch is going to talk a little bit about DQ.
DQ stuff. Is it all right if I do it on this screen, or are you good? I am going to take a little less than 15 minutes, hopefully closer to 10, to talk about the Remediation of Development Division, or RRD, situations, the work that we do, and I'll use a couple opportunities to tie in how our role at the Gelman site relates to the overall work that we do. And I imagine, since we've got such a well-educated audience, a lot of people have heard stories in the media already about the dire straits that our cleanup program is in. And at the outset, I want to emphasize that we've got some serious problems that affect both the environmental and economic impact on Michigan. We're going to be out of money for cleanup, state-funded cleanup dollars at the end of this fiscal year, which is at the end of September of 2008. And that affects not only the cleanup money, but brownfield redevelopment grants and loans and other incentives that we've got too. In addition, the money that we use to address leaking underground storage tank sites, otherwise one of my favorite government acronyms is LUST, leaking underground storage tank, so I'm going to use that acronym on we've got a backlog of about 9,000 sites that haven't been addressed in Michigan, and that program is severely underfunded. So that's the big part of the message. How did we get here? Michigan's the 8th most populous state in the nation, over 10 million people. We've got a legacy of industrial development that has created thousands of sites of environmental contamination that pose risk to human health and the environment. We're discovering more sites every year. The rate at which we're discovering sites has diminished somewhat, partly as a result of improved environmental regulations over the past 20 years. However, there's no real way to put our finger on how many unidentified sites we have. It's taken decades to create these sites. It's likely to take decades to clean up a lot of them. Sources of contamination cut across our entire society, things like industrial manufacturing sites, gas stations, dry cleaners, chemical companies, agriculture, all kinds of things. And some of us refer to Remediation and Redevelopment Division as sort of the junk drawer for the EPQ, in that we inherit problems that result from either poor regulation historically or where permitting and other environmental regulation programs have failed. You guys hear me without that mic? Here's a quick summary of the programs that RRD administers: the Contaminated Site Cleanup Program, otherwise known as Part 201, and the parts when I refer to this is the parts of the environmental code that Michigan has. The leaking underground storage tank or LUST is part 213. We also participate in the federal Superfund program, brownfield redevelopment and financial incentives, and we get money allocated to us to also deal with state-owned contaminated sites. A little bit more detail on the Part 201 program. We oversee or manage work at sites both that are handled by liable parties and at the university sites we call orphan sites where there is no liable party. And our goal is to protect public health, safety, welfare, and the environment. Response actions include, but are not necessarily limited to, reducing or mitigating threats from chemical exposure, reducing the risk from fire and explosion, and abandoned containers and drums. We do a lot of work in Washington County with the county emergency services folks on taking care of abandoned drums that show up on the side of the road and such. A particular note is the work we do to supply safe drinking water to people. This is an ongoing need. Over the past 20-some years, we've averaged about $5 million a year to provide safe drinking water to people, including monitoring well, replacement, and provision of municipal water systems. You can see that we've funded at least 16 municipal water supply systems and done a number of other things. This is an ongoing need. We've got a recent example in Jackson County, a former dry cleaner site. We've recently got some data from residential wells that indicate that it's contaminated with perp, the dry cleaning solvent, and we're going to have to fund municipal water systems for them at the cost of about $750,000.
So these figures are over what time frame? What's the time frame for these numbers?
Since the late 80s, the $927 million was spent. Recall that we had a 1988 bond initiative and a 1998 bond initiative. A lot of funding came from that. And we've also, I can get into later questions and answers about other funding sources.
Is all the bond money gone?
It's going to be gone at the end of this fiscal year, end of September. And baseline environmental assessments, a tool that was given to us in 1995. We've also received over 11,000 of those since 1995. An example of the 201 private party or liable party oversight we do, Gelman's a prime example. Sibyl's going to get into more detail. Roger, obviously already educated, and a lot of you people know more about it than I do because you lived it. But short story is the problem was identified. DEQ's role is to assure compliance with environmental laws. We tried to get that compliance, ended up going to court. That resulted in a consent judgment that ordered a cleanup. And so our job now is to assure compliance with the court order cleanup, and when we can't get compliance, work with the court to enforce what they've already ordered. I will note that Gelman is the site. My staff spend a lot more time on Gelman doing private party oversight than on any other site in the district. And that's for probably obvious reasons: the size of the problem, huge plumes, complex nature of the geology of the problem, and the level of community interest. But just be aware that that participation diminishes our ability to do some things at other sites. The leaking underground storage tank in general in the state, we've addressed over 12,000 storage tank releases, both by overseeing liable party actions and the orphan sites, again, the ones that we don't have liable parties available. The LUST program is a little bit different than the Part 201 program in our participation, in the sense that that's an audit program. Our role is to audit a percentage of the work that's done by qualified consultants and contractors. We currently, in Washington County, have 8 state-funded leaking underground storage tank actions. A couple of them are Arbor Wash, the former whale wash, and Huron Mini Mart are a couple that we're funding.
Is there anything available money for any offset?
I'll touch on that, but the short answer is the LUST. Did everybody hear Pat's question? Is there, okay. The LUS program right now is funded by a refined petroleum fund fee that every gallon of refined petroleum in Michigan has got a fee of 7/8 cents per gallon on it. And that generates in the range of $55 million a year. Over the past, from fiscal '05 to fiscal '07, of the $168 million that was collected for that, the state has seen about, I think it's 7% of that we've seen to actually go to leak into the storage tank site cleanup, and that's because the money gets used for other purposes. Some of it's funneled off the top to the Department of Agriculture for some things. Others, for example, $70 million was taken by the legislature to solve in part the fiscal '07 budget problem. 70 million. Superfund program in Michigan, briefly, it's a federal program. We've got state participation by our RD folks. We've had up to 82 sites on the list. We're down to 66 sites, but the state's invested $32 million in state match requirements. That's leveraged money, about $308 million from EPA and another $513 million from private parties to address that universe of complex and controversial sites. Brownfield Grant Loan Program, we've awarded about $95 million to 228 grant loan projects throughout the state, and that's to facilitate redevelopment. We estimate that that's resulted in over $3.1 billion in investment in the state and an estimate of 18,000 new jobs created. We've got a couple examples, one right here in Ann Arbor of the Broadway Lower Town project. It's got $700,000 grant and a $300,000 loan as a component of a redevelopment project that's going to result in planned use development for both residential and commercial use. Another one in Washington County is in the former American Foundry site. They received a $300,000 grant, and that resulted in cleanup of soils, and now there's a residential development on that former site contamination.
Mitch, do you know what percentage of brownfield grants actually goes to cleanup, quote-unquote activities, because there, of course, now there are grants, part of the grants can be to do things like road work, build parking structures, that sort of thing, in the brownfield program.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I think it's considerably less than total.
And, you know, some of these projects, the grant and loan projects, up until December of '07, the requirements for using the state funds for that were that there had to be a need for Part 201 response activities and a DEQ's role, and it was to assure that that was the case and that the response activities were conducted in a cost-efficient manner. There were some changes to the Brownfield Redevelopment and Financing Act in December that sort of backed away from some of those requirements to facilitate additional redevelopment.
Just for Lower Town example, I think $1 million is primarily cleanup, children and disposal. They have to double check whether it's all, but I know there was a big deal that they needed to get things started quickly, otherwise they were going to lose the loan. And it was all about the removal and disposition of the per-contaminated source. That's not loan money, that's tip money. I mean, here's the issue, it's just different pile of money. I don't think the loan has anything to do with anything but cleanup.
Here on Mini Mart's a good example of a Lust site that initially had some liable party response actions to address some explosive vapors in sewers in Ypsilanti in the late '90s. We worked with them to ensure that they took the actions needed to abate the imminent fire and explosion risk. The company, the owner-operator of that gas station, sold out in 2002 and left the state with an obligation, and we're spending state money now to run a groundwater treatment system to address some free product and and vapor issues. And then another example of a 201 state-funded site right here in Ann Arbor is the Army Cleaner dry cleaner site, very close to downtown Ann Arbor, in a mixed industrial commercial area. You can see there's a house within 20 feet of the Army Cleaner building. Dry cleaning solvent, perchloroethylene again, has resulted in soil and groundwater contamination and vapors getting into houses, particularly this one, which is a multi-apartment unit. This is taken from the top of the Army Cleaner building looking over the adjacent house. So what we've done so far for over $3.3 million is identified that there were some levels of concern in that adjacent apartment building and put in some air purifiers in there. We've done both state-funded investigation and brought in EPA with their trace atmospheric gas analyzer bus. This is a pretty cool unit that was in town for, was it about a week, man, or something like that?
Yeah.
All kinds of environmental monitoring equipment to get real-time data. Went in, this was a collaborative effort with the city and county, the state health department, and us to assess risks real-time in people's houses. This spotted thing is pictures of what are called summa canisters that we used to obtain indoor air samples. So all that and some additional work we're planning on doing for $3.3 million should help us address immediate concerns with the source. We've identified at least an approximate $3.4 million need to further explore and determine the extent of groundwater contamination and decide what, if anything, to do about it, whether the levels that are going to remain after the enactment of the source are going to need to be addressed with active remediation or whether we can get by without that. And that's a big, that's one of the sites that if we don't have money, it's going to sit there until we can find something to do. We don't have a viable project.
I'm always kind of amused that the area is referred to as mixed commercial. It's the block that our own community on is primarily residential.
Right across the street, though, you've got some commercial too.
Yeah,
it's-
across the street, but I mean, that block is three sides of it are all, so it's primarily residential.
As you can see from some of the examples, we've got a range of scope of sites that we work on, from a relatively low cost, $50,000, take 1 to 3 years to deal with, up to the higher cost ones, Armin, Gelman, which the state isn't currently paying for. It's obviously taken a lot more than 10 years. I'm not sure how much the company spent on dealing with that yet. These pictures are the Pine River, also called Superfund site in Gratiot County. And over $100 million that's been spent on that. And depending on what endpoint we end up deciding to reach, it's probably going to be a lot more, and there's no viable part of us to go up from there. So some of the additional needs that we've already identified based on what we know is that we've got more than 400 current projects that need additional funding to complete, including long-term operational maintenance and treatment system. The two leak underground storage tank site examples, here on Mini Mart and Arbor Wash, I need to fall into the latter category. We're operating treatment systems and we continue to operate those till they reach their goals, whereas Armin is another good example of where we need additional funding. We know that there's at least 1,600 abandoned landfills that require assessment in potential methane and groundwater problems. Continuing need to provide safe alternative water that I already mentioned. The leak underground storage tank sites, of the 9,000 open releases we've got, half of them are orphan sites, and then all kinds of derelict buildings, full safety and blood problems. So we've come up with an approximate need for both our Part 201 cleanup program as well as the leak underground storage tank program. $95 million a year is what we estimate is needed for the non-leaking underground storage tank sites. Split, so that's $50 million for state project funding, at the orphan sites, sites with critical public health and environmental threats, and sites with significant redevelopment potential and repair issues. $10 million for grant and loan program, and $25 million a year for staffing and administration, including compliance assistance, but our rent, whether it's something. The leaking underground storage tank, remember I said there's 9,000 open releases out of 21,000 confirmed releases. Michigan is third in the nation behind California and Florida in terms of the backlog of sites that we have. And those our three states combined account for about a third of the unaddressed leaking underground storage tank sites. Now, it's important to note that Florida and California each have feeding programs that generate $200 million each per year for their leaking underground storage tank problem. And as I told you, in answer to Pat's question earlier, we get our funding through a 7/8 cent per gallon fee on refined petroleum fund, we generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $54 million. The formula that the legislature has established would give us about $24 million a year to work on our orphan sites, and you don't always see that. So for a total leaking underground storage tank program need, we estimate $140 million per year to address new releases and implement our current audit program. $25 million for critical needs at existing orphan sites, and then $12 million, which is 7% of the total for administration. And note, to put a further damper on things, that this $177 million a year figure doesn't really account for the whole problem that we think needs to be addressed. It only deals with new releases identified each year and a small fraction of the backlog. We're averaging about 300 new releases from leaking underground storage tank systems per year. We're able to get about 250 to 300 closures per year statewide. So there's a pretty large new result. For the two programs combined, that works out to $272 million. And absent some additional long-term stable funding source, the implications are that we wouldn't be able to do new projects. We're already scaling back existing projects to work on the higher priority sites. I mentioned earlier we do some emergency cleanups, whether it be orphan drum pickup or the money, for example, that we're getting put to municipal water that's like in Jackson is going to be probably part of the emergency funding. And so that makes for some hard decisions. So to summarize, got an industrial legacy that's resulted in some significant long-term pollution problems. We feel a pretty good job dealing with what we have, but much remains to be accomplished. And under the current scenario, we're at cleanup bucks at the end of 2008, fiscal 2008, which runs the end of September. And again, we see the need we've identified of $177 million a year for lost and 9,500 for non-lost sites. And given our natural resources, public health and economic health will be in jeopardy without a long-term stable funding source.
What kind of impact are you now experiencing on the older side of non-municipal like Boston? As far as continuing funds for hours to do that oversight and public involved. Are you limited at this point? Do you foresee limitations?
We want to make sure I understand the question. You're asking what kind of sort of constraints on what we're able to do are we experiencing now?
For existing sites that you're overseeing,
Well,
rather than...
we've had because of the budget concerns, we've had a vacancy in our office, which covers a 5-county area that includes Washington, Jackson, Monroe, those 100 counties. Had a vacancy for about 4 years, and we haven't been able to fill. Other districts are in the same boat, and we're doing the best we can with what we got, but there are things that we aren't able to get to. Our goal, for example, when we get complaints about new sites, is to at least assess the initial risk that that problem poses in relation to the other ones we deal with. And we put them on a list right now and project based on what we know, what the future need is going to be to investigate that. We are running into problems in terms of being able to interact with liable parties in as timely a manner as I would like to be able to do it. And it takes a while longer for us to respond to the submittals that we do us and such.
But as of now, the funding dollars are in your staff. You don't have the staff to use the dollars appropriately, and at the end of the, there won't be the funding at all. For any of it.
Right.
And then what happens? Is there a priority for existing sites to continue with whatever emergency or other kinds of funding that might come along?
Yeah,
In the absence of a long-term stable or a new fund?
well, every year we get together, each district gets together with Lansing Division Management and identifies sites that have needs and what work we're going to be able to do, and then Lansing puts those all together and assembles a priority list. We do hold out a little bit of money for emergencies. I'm not sure what the balance is right now, there's probably a couple million, that even when the money runs out at the end of this fiscal year, we should have a little bit of money in reserve to address high priority emergencies. But absent that, I'm not sure what we're going to do, to tell you the truth. We just, as a result of the supplemental, which I don't even know whether the governor has signed yet, there's a fiscal aid supplemental for numerous departments that funded the DEQ staff. There are a number of our RRD positions were being held vacant as potential landing spots, and then other programs like Water Bureau, Air Quality, and the Water Management Divisions had to get laid off. There would be some landing spots for them. But there's definitely going to be some serious problems, staff funding wise too. I think we've got enough money probably to fund our staff through fiscal 09 and we would work on absent to the long-term stable funding source, we'd probably work on things like getting existing projects to logical stopping points until such time as we could get additional funds to carry on our work.
So what's your funding shortfall?
About 272 per million per year.
272 million. How many people in Michigan?
Over 10 million.
And how many of those get the $600 rebate? How much of the rebate is going to be needed to fund the DEQ if it does?
I don't know if that's going to.
I wonder if you could just remind people that, or is it true that unlike most cleanups and responsible party reimbursement fees your costs initially, but that's not true in the past?
Well, that's a good point. A sore point with many of us is a matter of fact. When we negotiate cleanup actions with liable parties, after the liability scheme changed in 1995, we try and and oftentimes do get agreements with liable parties to reimburse the department's oversight costs at these sites. That wasn't provided for in the court order, the consent judgment that provides a simple framework for this cleanup, with some exceptions. It turns out, for example, that they're determined to be out of compliance. There's a provision for us to get reimbursed for some of our oversight costs. So, this is one where between civil and the site geologist, we've got about one full-time person per year, actually a little bit over one full-time person per year working on this, and that's a significant sum.
I think one important point I think is covered is why the DEQ is not managing this cleanup independent of the court. How did it get a court in the middle between the party responsible and the DEQ?
Well, are you better able to answer that than I
I'm
said?
going to address that briefly, I guess, during our discussion.
I think,
Because normally the DEQ deals with this directly.
Well, no, we've got a range of options.
I mean, without a court order.
Well, one of our, what we'll do is we'll seek out a liable party to do a cleanup. If we can't identify a liable party, in the past, we've used the state funding that's available to do the work that needs to be done. When we do identify liable parties, we notice them that we think they're liable for contamination and request that they do the necessary response activities complied with the law. If they refuse to do so or claim poverty, we've got a number of options that include issuing them what's called unilateral order, issuing them a notice that if you don't do the work, we're going to do it, and that sets you up for triple damages. Or in the past, and our ability to do this now is obviously limited, we said we're going to go ahead and spend state money to do the work, and then we'll seek the cost recovery. Or we'll go to court and enforce, require you to do the work. It doesn't necessarily have to be doing that on administrative order. In this case, I believe the decision was made that the company wasn't complying with the law, and I don't know if they sued us first, or if we sued. I know there was a suit by Gelman for us to promulgate rules, which Chuck Gelman ended up winning that, but sometimes there's no way to avoid going to court to get the desired result. The problem is, once it goes to court, obviously the court is the final decision maker on it, and you don't always get the result that you decided at the outset. So that's that's a risk that the department and probably any other state agency undertakes when they decide to take someone to court.
I think the state put government support to recover response costs that have already been incurred by the state and the local jurisdictions, and also to require the full response activity. Unfortunately, the state lost the case in state court and circuit court. The judge found the state primarily responsible for the contamination. They won in federal district court for response activity reimbursement. On a summary judgment, they didn't try that case. They tried the state court. They settled both without trial. The problem for the state was that they won one case and lost the other. And that's why the consent judgment to settle those two cases isn't entirely favorable to the state, just as you pointed out with reimbursement of administrative costs. There were a lot of things that, under a circumstance where the state had prevailed in its actions against a responsible party, there would have been much more favorable terms for the state. In this case, that wasn't the case. And in fact, in the original settlement, there was no date certain when any cleanup had to start. All the company had to do was submit some plans and by certain dates, but this went on because there was no requirement that they actually start things. So and the state has fixed that to some extent in revisions of consent judgment, but it was a very difficult road to go for the state because the state didn't successfully.
Okay, I'm going to transition into our role in CARD and turn it over to Civil. As Roger mentioned, Civil participates in many of the monthly meetings, and Jim Coder, our geologist, participates in the technical group along with Civil and the other technical group participants. And so our role is to participate, get feedback from local residents and citizen groups and individuals, and provide periodic updates to everyone. Before I turn it over to Civil, I know we did introductions, and we've got a couple